My name is Marissa Langford. I'm 34, a forensic accountant with a specialty in uncovering corporate fraud and financial deception. It's a job that's made me good at reading spreadsheets and even better at reading people. But somehow, despite everything I've seen and everything I've done, I didn't see this coming. I didn't expect the betrayal to come from my own blood, from my father, from my brother, and most of all from the very family I had been silently protecting for years. Before I continue, let me know in the comments what part of the world you're watching from. Also subscribe because another story drops tomorrow. I grew up in the kind of household that preached loyalty over logic. My parents, Lyle and Sharon Langford, ran a family business, Langford Construction, a mid-sized contracting company that served the tri-state area. From the outside, we looked admirable, respectable. But behind the glossy community photos and charity event appearances was a family obsessed with hierarchy, control, and image. My older brother, Preston, was always supposed to be the heir. Never mind that I graduated magna cum laude or that I've testified in federal court. Never mind that I saved one of our biggest clients from a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme. In my family, Preston was the golden child. The one who understood people, as Dad put it. The one who was destined to take over Langford Construction. I wasn't bitter, at least not at first. I had my own career. I made good money. I didn't need their business. What I needed was to believe that, deep down, I still mattered to them. That they saw me as more than just a smart mouth with a calculator, as Preston liked to joke. So when Dad called a family meeting one Sunday afternoon at the estate, I assumed it was serious. He never used that phrase unless something big was going down. The last time, it was when he'd had a minor heart scare and updated his will. This time, he said, it was about legacy. I should have known. I walked into the living room that day wearing a tailored navy blazer, my laptop bag slung over one shoulder. Everyone else was already there. My parents, seated on the cream leather sectional. Preston in a casual button-down, lounging like he owned the place, which, as it turned out, he soon would. And Aunt Marla, Dad's sister, the unofficial family gossip recorder. I sat down on the far end of the couch. The tension in the room was subtle, like the scent of something burning that you can't quite place. "Thanks for coming, honey," Mom said, her voice overly sweet. Dad cleared his throat and looked at Preston before speaking. "I've made a decision," he said. "It's time to pass the torch." I froze. He didn't even glance in my direction. Effective this week, Preston will be taking over full operations at Langford Construction. And with that responsibility comes the deed to the office building, plus control of all assets and accounts related to the business. The words didn't register at first. It was like hearing a judge's sentence in a foreign language. Then it hit me. He'd just handed over the entire business, the building, the assets, the legacy, to Preston. No discussion, no warning, no acknowledgement of my years of helping them avoid lawsuits, back taxes, and fraudulent vendors. Preston grinned. "That's right," he said, resting his foot on the coffee table. "Dad said it's time someone with vision stepped in. Someone who knows how to lead." I stared at him, dumbfounded. But I've handled the company audits for the past 5 years. I caught the Carter bid scam. I saved the company thousands. Preston cut me off with a smirk. "Yeah, and we appreciated that. But come on, Marissa. You're more of a back-end support type. You don't exactly inspire confidence in the field." I clenched my jaw. And how, exactly, is signing the business over without informing your own daughter supposed to inspire confidence? Dad finally looked at me. "You've got your career, Marissa. We didn't want to burden you with company stress." Burden me? I had reviewed their contracts, cleaned up their payroll mess, and created compliance reports that had saved them from fines. But this wasn't about stress. It was about control. "You're giving him the deed," I repeated slowly. "To the property, to everything." Dad nodded. "It's already been filed with the county." I didn't speak for a long time. I just sat there, letting the betrayal soak into my bones. The room buzzed with quiet satisfaction. Preston leaned back, smug and unbothered. Mom sipped her wine. Aunt Marla fiddled with her bracelet. But they didn't know what I knew. What I'd found out 2 weeks ago, when a routine credit check flagged something strange. At the time, I thought it was a fluke, a data entry error. But when I pulled my credit report, I saw it. An active loan in my name. A $175,000 line of credit opened 3 months ago. The address listed? The Langford Construction Building. And the cosigner? Preston Langford. I hadn't said anything yet. I wanted to be sure. I'd already started an investigation through a friend in the fraud department of the bank. Preston had forged my signature, used my name to secure a business loan. And now, the deed was in his hands. It all made sense. The sudden uptick in renovations, the luxury SUV he'd been driving, the hush-hush meetings in the back office. They didn't know that while they were celebrating, quote, the new CEO, I had already pulled the records, compiled the signatures, and filed a fraud report with the state attorney general. They didn't know I had evidence, screenshots, emails, call logs, and an internal memo from the bank flagging Preston's application as potentially manipulated. They didn't know, but they would. I smiled. Not the kind of smile you wear when you're happy, the kind you wear when you know what's coming next. I didn't drive home right after the meeting. I sat in my car outside the estate for nearly 20 minutes, engine idling, eyes fixed on the wrought iron gates, like they might swing open and offer me an apology. But nothing came. No one followed me. No one called to explain. No one even noticed I left without a word. Typical. My family had always been good at rewriting history. Dad, especially. He called it framing the narrative, a tactic he'd used successfully in business and at home. If you repeat a version of events enough times, people start to believe it. Even you. But numbers don't lie. Documents don't forget. And unlike my father and brother, I kept receipts. By the time I got back to my apartment, my head was pounding. I dropped my bag, changed into sweatpants, and pulled out my laptop. There were files to finish. 2 weeks ago, when I first saw the loan pop up in my name, I'd thought it was a bank error. But then I found 3 more red flags. A forged digital signature on the loan application, a notarization stamp that had been retired over a year ago, a falsified profit and loss statement using my consulting letterhead. That last one hit hardest, because it meant Preston didn't just sign my name. He'd faked an entire letter from me endorsing the company's financials. He made me complicit. If the loan defaulted, I would have been legally on the hook. Worse, professionally discredited. My stomach turned. This wasn't just betrayal. It was fraud. Federal. Punishable. Traceable. And now that Dad had handed over the deed, they were getting bolder. I had to act, soon, but not impulsively. If you want revenge to last, it has to be done right. Clean. Controlled. Documented. I spent the next 2 hours finalizing my report. PDF after PDF of evidence, neatly labeled. Forged loan documents. Email headers from Preston's account. Fake consultant letterhead comparison. Internal banknotes, confidential. Witness email, anonymous employee. I had also reached out to a former classmate, now an assistant district attorney. She told me if I submitted everything as a whistleblower complaint, they could open a preliminary investigation without alerting Preston. So I did. At 1:13 a.m., I clicked Submit. Then I emailed copies to my secure personal account and another copy to an external hard drive locked in my desk drawer, just in case. The next morning, I woke up with a new kind of energy, like the fog had lifted. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally stop asking for permission and start demanding respect. Dad called around noon. I let it go to voicemail. Preston texted 2 hours later. Hope you're not mad. Wasn't personal. I didn't reply. Because what I was planning next? That would be personal. The following day, I booked a meeting with Mr. James Rollins, our family's longtime real estate attorney. He'd handled everything, from the purchase of the Langford office building to the drafting of my grandparents' wills. He trusted me. More importantly, he owed me. 2 years ago, I'd helped save his firm from an audit nightmare involving a junior associate's billing scandal. And now it was time to call in that favor. When I walked into his office, he looked up from his desk and smiled. Marissa, haven't seen you in a while. This is about the transfer of the deed to my brother, I said, sitting down. His smile faltered. I assumed you were aware. I wasn't. I laid the paperwork on his desk. Here's what concerns me. Preston secured a commercial loan using that building as collateral, under my name, before the deed was transferred. James's eyes widened as he scanned the documents. This signature, it's not yours? No. And this financial letter, it has your branding. He faked it. Silence. I'm filing fraud charges, I said calmly. But before that gets traction, I need something else. I want you to arrange a family shareholder update. He blinked. We're not a public company. But Langford Construction has silent partners, including 2 of my cousins who invested years ago. You want to confront Preston publicly? I nodded. At the next board-style meeting. You'll host it, I'll bring the truth. He leaned back, tapping his pen on the desk. You realize this will get ugly? Not if I do it right. We scheduled the meeting for the following Thursday. A family investor update, with all stakeholders invited, including Aunt Marla and Cousin Jen, both of whom owned minority shares. I requested it be held at the Langford office building. In the conference room, Preston now believed he ruled. That week, I went quiet. No contact, no hints, just preparation. Preston posted a photo of himself standing in the office lobby, arms folded like some kind of visionary. Caption: The future is now. Big moves coming. The comment from Dad made me sick. Proud of you, son. Keep pushing the legacy forward. Let them have their illusion. It was about to shatter. I dressed sharp the day of the meeting. Steel gray pantsuit, minimal jewelry, flash drive in my purse, printed copies in a manila folder. James greeted me at the front with a nervous smile. They're all inside. I nodded. Let's begin. I walked into the conference room like it was a courtroom. Because in a way, it was. Preston stood at the head of the table, sipping espresso from a Langford Construction mug like he'd been born for this. Dad stood beside him, Mom in the corner, Aunt Marla and Cousin Jen already seated, flipping through agenda packets. I took my seat without a word. James cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. Today's meeting is to discuss the future of Langford Construction and its assets. Before we begin, Marissa has prepared a statement. Preston frowned. A statement? Yes, I said, pulling the folder from my bag. And you're going to want to listen. He scoffed. I run the company now, Marissa. You're not even on the board. True, I said evenly. But as the primary victim in a felony case involving your recent financial decisions, I think I've earned the floor. The room fell silent. Even Dad looked confused. Victim? He asked. I stood and clicked the USB drive into the projector. The first slide appeared. Loan fraud, $175,000 filed under Marissa Langford's name. Gasps, eyes darting, whispers starting. And then the second slide, forged signatures. Falsified consultant letters. Notarized using expired seal. Preston's face drained of color. Wait, what is this? This, I said, advancing to the next slide, is the reason I filed a fraud report, and why I'll be pressing charges unless certain conditions are met. He started to stammer. Dad looked at him. You told me she co-signed that loan. Preston didn't answer. I laid out the evidence, page by page, calm and precise. My voice didn't waver. My hands didn't shake. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of them. The room was dead silent, except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Preston's mouth opened and closed like he wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The projector screen now displayed a slide titled Summary of Evidence. 4 bullet points, each one precise. Each one damning. Dad finally broke the silence. Marissa, are you sure this is necessary? He tried to smile like he always did when smoothing things over in meetings with irate subcontractors. You could have just come to me, we're family. I turned slowly to face him. I came to you, at the meeting last week, and you handed Preston the deed like I didn't exist. My tone was calm, measured, but inside, my pulse was pounding in my ears. Preston stepped forward, hands raised in mock innocence. Look, maybe I cut a few corners, but it was for the business. You wouldn't understand how things work on the ground. I held up a hand. Stop talking. I flipped to the next slide. A side-by-side comparison of my actual signature and the one on the loan documents. Even a junior handwriting analyst could spot the forgery, I said. Let alone the mismatched notary records, the doctored tax returns, and the fake email headers traced to your company account. Cousin Jen leaned forward, eyebrows raised. You forged documents and tied her name to it? Preston looked pale. Okay, yes, but the company needed liquidity. I thought I could pay it back before anyone noticed. I turned to the room. That's the part everyone always says. Before anyone notices. But someone did notice. And now the state attorney general's office has the complaint. Gasps again. Mom finally stood, her voice shaky. Sweetheart, don't escalate this. We can fix this privately. This doesn't need to be public. Doesn't it? I asked. When Dad transferred the deed to Preston, it effectively handed him leverage to liquidate, remortgage, or sell company property, which he already tried to do by using my name and credit. James spoke up from the head of the table. As a legal advisor, I'm compelled to say that this could expose the company and all shareholders to liability. He paused. Especially if the fraud claim is validated. Preston laughed, bitter and desperate. This is insane. What, you want to take over now? You want the company? I shook my head. No, I don't want the company. I want the truth exposed and my name cleared. And I want accountability. Dad's face hardened. And if we say no, I looked at him, then I'll file a civil suit and press criminal charges, which, trust me, will hold. I've built stronger cases with less. The threat landed like a stone dropped in a still pond. Waves of shock rippled across the room. I've already contacted my attorney. The fraud report is submitted. The bank flagged the loan for investigation. You have 48 hours to respond before the court gets involved. Preston's voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't think you'd go this far. You stole from me, I said, and you used me to do it. At that moment, a knock interrupted the tension. The conference room door opened. A security guard stepped inside, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. James rose and walked toward them. They're here at Ms. Langford's request. Given the potential legal liability, it's been decided that Mr. Preston Langford should vacate the premises until this matter is resolved. What the hell? Preston backed up. You're kicking me out? Dad stood. Marissa, this is absurd. You're making a scene. No, I said quietly, standing with my bag in hand. I'm making a point. The officers approached. Sir, we need you to leave the premises. Now. Preston stared at me, betrayed. But I didn't flinch. Not this time. You'll hear from my lawyer, he muttered as they escorted him out of the room. Good, I said, meeting his gaze one last time. So will mine. When the door closed behind them, I turned back to the table. The silence was now different. Not stunned disbelief, but quiet reckoning. James cleared his throat. Meeting adjourned. I gathered my folder and turned to leave. But before I reached the door, Aunt Marla called out softly, Marissa? I paused. Good for you, she said. Then, surprisingly, Cousin Jen added, About time someone stood up to them. I nodded once, then walked out. Head high, hands steady. A quiet fury finally turned into action. But this wasn't over. Not yet. The real fallout was still coming. Because, as I would soon discover, Preston's betrayal went deeper than a forged signature. And my father? P. He hadn't just handed over the deed. He'd buried secrets in that building. Secrets even I hadn't uncovered. Yet. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. The adrenaline had barely worn off when I reached my car. My hands were steady, but my mind was racing. Because the look on Preston's face when the officers escorted him out wasn't just embarrassment or anger. It was fear. Real fear. And it wasn't because he thought I'd humiliated him. It was because he knew I'd only scratched the surface. I opened my glove box and pulled out the folder I hadn't shown at the meeting, the second file. The one I'd compiled after digging deeper into Langford Construction's financial history over the past 18 months. A hunch had sent me there after I uncovered the forged loan. And what I found wasn't just more sloppiness. It was rot. Deliberate, hidden, systemic. Dad had always prided himself on keeping the business in the family. No outside investors, no board oversight, just good old Langford grit. But when I began cross-referencing vendor payments and project invoices from the past 2 fiscal years, inconsistencies began to stack up. Invoices for materials from suppliers that didn't exist, payments made to LLCs registered under names I didn't recognize, until I traced them to shell companies linked to Preston. Payroll records padded with ghost employees, most of whom had social security numbers tied to nothing but P.O. boxes in 3 different states. It was textbook fraud, and it had all been disguised as business as usual. But here was the kicker. Some of the documents bore Dad's signature, digital and physical, and they weren't forged. I knew his handwriting like my own. He'd signed them willingly, knowingly. So while Preston was the one who'd stolen my name and used it to open the loan, he hadn't been acting alone. He wasn't rogue. He was protected, enabled, coached. And for the first time in my life, I realized something chilling. My father hadn't just chosen Preston to take over the business. He'd built the fraud around him, and around me. Because what better way to keep things quiet than to involve the one person with a spotless reputation, the company's unofficial auditor, the daughter who wouldn't ask questions, the one who would feel guilty for digging too deep? Well, they miscalculated. That evening, I reached out to Nicole Reeves, another former law school classmate turned white-collar crime investigator. I sent her everything, not just the documents from the forged loan, but the secondary file, the shell companies, the falsified payroll, the ghost vendors. I told her I needed confirmation. I wanted to be sure I wasn't jumping at shadows. 2 days later, she called me. Her voice was low, measured. "This is big, Marissa." "How big?" "Federal. Money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud." "You're not imagining this. These aren't one-offs. This is a network." I leaned back in my chair, breath caught in my throat. "How long have they been doing it?" She hesitated. "Best guess? 3 to 5 years." My mind reeled. That long. That deep. "They've used the company as a front," she continued. "These shell vendors? They're designed to look legitimate, but are clearly pass-through entities. And Preston's name isn't the only one that shows up in the filings." I already knew what she'd say next. Lyle Langford. My father, my mentor, my betrayer. I hung up the phone and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about exposure and justice. But justice, real justice, takes time and planning. I contacted my bank and requested all transaction records tied to Langford Construction over the past 5 years. I pulled up tax documents, mortgage filings, property records, anything tied to the business. And then I made a decision. I was going back to the building. The Langford Construction headquarters wasn't just an office. It was practically a shrine to my father's ego. 2 floors, private corner office, framed magazine covers on the wall, most from obscure local publications Dad had probably paid to be featured in. But I wasn't there for nostalgia. I had one goal: find the hard copies. Because if there's one thing I've learned as a forensic accountant, it's that even the smartest fraudsters keep paper. Receipts, contracts, checks. Files they don't want in the cloud. I waited until I knew Preston was gone. James had confirmed he'd agreed to step away temporarily while the matter was under internal review. But the building was still open, still staffed. I walked in like I owned the place. And, in a way, I did. Because I owned the truth now. And the truth was leverage. I nodded to the receptionist, smiled at the junior project manager I remembered from last year's holiday party, and made my way upstairs. No one stopped me. No one questioned me. That was the advantage of being underestimated for so long. Inside Dad's office, I opened the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet. It wasn't locked. And there, stacked neatly in manila envelopes, were the originals, payroll files, Signed vendor agreements. Disbursement requests bearing both Preston's and Dad's signatures. But one envelope caught my eye, labeled in my father's tidy, aggressive cursive. Marissa, emergency use only. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter, dated 2 years ago, addressed to a private lender, requesting a line of credit guaranteed by my name, signed by my father. No Preston, no board resolution, just Lyle Langford, using his daughter as collateral. And that's when I knew. It had never been about choosing Preston over me. It had always been about controlling me, keeping me close enough to use, but not close enough to matter. I walked out of the building with that envelope tucked beneath my blazer. Head high, expression calm. But inside, something had snapped. My revenge wasn't done. In fact, it hadn't even started, because now I had everything I needed. Documents, dates, signatures, intent. The next move would be mine. And when I made it, it wouldn't just clear my name. It would bury theirs. 2 days after I left the Langford building with that letter, my name used as credit collateral, signed without my knowledge, I found myself at my kitchen counter, staring at it again. How many other deals had Dad made using my reputation? How many documents had he signed with the unspoken assumption that I'd never find out, or if I did, I'd never act? He was wrong. And now I had proof that both he and Preston had leveraged my name and professional credibility for years, not just once. It was time for the line in the sand. I made 3 copies of the emergency letter, one for the State Fraud Division, one for my attorney, and one for a secure folder I'd labeled Final Strike. Then I made the call. Nicole Reeves, my investigator friend, answered immediately. "I'm ready to escalate," I said. "You're sure? I don't want to hurt my family, but I'm not going to let them bury me to protect themselves." She didn't try to talk me out of it. She just said, "Then here's what we do next." Over the next 3 days, we submitted an amended complaint to the State Attorney General's office, then a separate one to the IRS Fraud Division, then another to the State Licensing Board, because Dad had signed off on state-certified financials for Langford Construction that were riddled with false reporting and ghost vendors. 3 dominoes, all timed to fall within 48 hours of each other. By the end of the week, Langford Construction would be under more scrutiny than it had ever seen in its 42-year history. But I wasn't done, because I knew my father. And I knew he'd fight this not with logic or facts, but with shame, with emotion, with manipulation. He'd go to the extended family, to family friends, to business contacts, and claim I was unstable, ungrateful, bitter. So I had to cut him off before he could start, and I knew exactly how. It started with a phone call to my Aunt Felicia, Mom's sister, and one of the few in the family who had ever truly believed in me. "Aunt Felicia," I said gently, "do you remember how you told me years ago that I could come to you if I ever felt like something wasn't right?" "Of course, honey. I need you to hear something, and I need you to keep it to yourself, for now." I sent her the copy of the forged loan application, then the vendor pass-throughs, then the emergency letter signed by my father. 10 minutes later, she called back. Her voice shook. "Oh my God, Marissa. I'm telling you this because there's going to be a narrative soon, and I don't want you hearing it from Dad. You need to tell the rest of the family." "I will, but not yet. Not until they try to spin this." Which didn't take long. The next morning, I woke up to 3 texts from cousins, asking if I was okay, and if I'd really accused Dad and Preston of stealing from me. By lunchtime, it had spread to family friends. Even one of my old high school teachers messaged me awkwardly trying to ask if I was at odds with the family. And by dinner, my mother had sent me a text I'll never forget. "I don't know who you are anymore. If you think this crusade will make you feel better, go ahead. But just know, you're tearing us apart." It didn't even feel like a slap. It felt rehearsed, like something she'd been saving. I didn't respond. Instead, I scheduled a Zoom call. 1 invitation. 22 family members, all key stakeholders, cousins, aunts, and even 2 minor shareholders in Langford Construction. I called it a clarity briefing. Only 14 showed up. That was enough. I sat in front of my camera, hair pulled back, blazer pressed, eyes sharp. "Thank you for making time," I began. "I'm not here to ask for anyone's approval or forgiveness. I'm here to make sure you hear the facts from me." One by one, I laid out everything. The forged $175,000 loan. The shell companies used for pass-throughs. The ghost employees. The signed letter using my name for private credit. The complaint filings with the AG's office, IRS, and licensing board. Some faces went pale. Others pinched with denial. Uncle Ray interrupted. "This is going to ruin the company." I looked directly at him. "No, Preston, and my father already did that. I'm just cleaning up the wreckage." "You could have come to us first," another cousin offered. I nodded slowly. I did. I came to them after the forged loan. And instead of apologizing, Dad handed Preston the deed to the company. Without explanation, without restitution, without even basic respect. Silence. Then, Aunt Felicia unmuted. "I saw the documents myself," she said, her voice calm but tight. "This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate." The tide turned. Questions shifted from whether I was exaggerating to how this had gone on for so long without anyone noticing. "I noticed," I said, "and now I'm doing something about it." When the call ended, my inbox was flooded, some with apologies, some with anger, and one from Preston. "You've gone too far. You think you'll come out clean in this? You're just as involved now." I stared at that message for a long time, and then I sent one sentence back. "See you in court." Because now, it wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about making sure this kind of betrayal never happened again. Not to me, not to anyone else he thought he could manipulate. The line was drawn, and I was done pretending to be the quiet daughter in the background. I received the formal summons for mediation the following Tuesday. The letterhead was crisp. Langford Construction had hired one of the top corporate litigation firms in the state, the kind you only call when you're trying to scare someone into silence. A strategy that might have worked if I didn't already know exactly how scared they were. They wanted mediation, not court. Translation. They wanted to settle quietly, without the exposure, without the depositions, without the press. Because at this point, it wasn't just me and a few documents. It was a growing paper trail and 3 active investigations. The bank had escalated its internal audit. The licensing board had suspended Dad's contractor credentials pending review. And the IRS? They didn't call. They simply began to pull. And I hadn't even gone public yet. My attorney, Layla, met me at her downtown office to prep for mediation. She was everything I wasn't allowed to be as a daughter, sharp, unyielding, and completely disinterested in appeasement. "They'll try to get you to sign a non-disclosure clause," she said, flipping through their opening offer. "Let them try," I replied, because that's what this was now. A game of who would blink first. The mediation was scheduled for Thursday at a neutral office suite in Midtown. A glass tower, 20 stories high, sterile and polished and perfect for secrets. When I walked into the building that morning, I felt nothing. No nerves, no guilt, just precision. It was time. Dad and Preston were already inside the conference room when I arrived. Both wore dark suits. Both refused to look at me. Their legal team sat across the long mahogany table, a trio of suited sharks with binders stacked like bricks. My lawyer and I sat opposite them, calm and prepared. The mediator, a soft-spoken man named Harold, opened the meeting with a neutral tone. "Our goal today is to find resolution that avoids escalation to a courtroom. Let's begin by acknowledging what's brought us here." Preston's lawyer launched into a statement about misunderstandings, miscommunications, and emotional entanglements. She painted the forged documents as overzealous decisions made during a liquidity crisis. She said the intent was never malicious, and that Preston had always viewed me as a trusted collaborator. I nearly laughed. When she finished, the room turned to me. I stood, placed the original copy of the forged letter in the center of the table, and slid it toward the mediator. That letter used my name and credit history to apply for private funds. It was signed by my father and used to leverage collateral from a building I had no knowledge was being refinanced. I added another document. This vendor file includes 10 companies created by Preston, registered under false addresses, which received payouts for services never rendered. My signature does not appear on any of them, but several reports falsely list me as project auditor. I slid a third file across the table. This is a copy of my complaint to the Attorney General's office. The file is still open. But if we don't resolve this today on my terms, it will become very public, very soon. Dad's lawyer whispered something to him. For the first time, Dad spoke. "Marissa," he said, voice low, "you don't need to do this." I looked at him, not with anger, but clarity. "You already did it. I'm just documenting it." Preston finally looked up. His expression was the same smug defiance I remembered from every Thanksgiving argument, every teenage tantrum. Every time I'd been told to let him be, he's just under pressure. "You want to take us down over a mistake?" I leaned forward. "I want to take back my name, and I want every penny you gained by misusing it paid back in full." The mediator cleared his throat. "Let's discuss proposed resolutions." Their legal team offered a lump sum, $275,000, with a gag clause. I declined. They offered to reinstate my name on company documents, give me a voting stake, and rebrand the incident as an internal audit. I declined. Finally, Layla laid out our terms: $500,000 in restitution, covering the forged loan, projected damage to my credit and reputation, and punitive damages for intentional misrepresentation. Immediate resignation of Preston Langford from all corporate positions, with a written admission of misconduct provided to the state licensing board. A public statement, written by me, to be posted to Langford Construction's official website for 30 days, acknowledging the internal fraud and corrective measures taken. No gag order. I retained full legal right to speak about the experience in any medium. Dad stood up, his voice trembling now, not with rage, but panic. "You'll destroy everything I built." I looked up at him, calm, cold. "No, you did that. I'm just putting up the caution tape so no one else trips over the rubble." He sat back down, and for the first time in my life, he looked small. The silence in the room stretched thin. Then, slowly, the mediator nodded. "We have agreement on terms. I'll prepare the documentation." It took 2 hours to finalize everything. 2 hours for a family legacy to be dismantled, brick by brick, clause by clause. And when I walked out of that building, I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean, light, free. But the final piece of my plan was still to come, because Preston wasn't the only one who'd used my name. And before this was over, the world would see that the Langford name had been propped up on deception for years, and I had one last move to make. The press release went live on a Monday morning. It was simple, professional, and devastating in its precision. Langford Construction announces internal restructuring following financial audit findings. It was the headline I'd written. Approved through mediation. Published on their official website, then syndicated to local business journals, buried in the third paragraph was the statement that mattered most. Following a third-party investigation, the company acknowledges a breach of internal controls, including unauthorized financial activity linked to senior personnel. Corrective measures include the resignation of Preston Langford and restitution to impacted parties. No names. But everyone knew. Within hours, my inbox filled with messages. Former clients. Vendors. Employees I hadn't spoken to in years. One email stood out. Subject: "You were right." From Elaine D., a former project manager who'd quit without explanation 2 years ago. I saw things. Sketchy invoices. Projects being marked complete that hadn't started. When I asked questions, Preston told me to back off. I left. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up then." I replied within minutes. "You're speaking up now. That matters." But the real storm broke 3 days later. Channel 4 Investigates ran a segment titled, "Trusted Legacy, Tarnished Ledger, Allegations of Fraud Inside a Family Business." They'd picked up the story after a leak. Not from me, but from someone inside the state licensing board. The story featured redacted excerpts from the AG's preliminary fraud case. It highlighted the forged loan, the shell vendors, and the emergency letter. My name was blurred in documents, but I knew exactly what I was looking at. The footage showed the Langford building, now half vacant. For lease signs in the windows. A news truck parked outside. the kind of visibility Dad had spent decades cultivating, now turned back on him like a mirror he couldn't escape. By Friday, the Board of Contractors had revoked my father's license. Langford Construction lost its ability to bid on public projects. The commercial loan I never authorized was officially declared fraudulent, nullifying Preston's collateral agreements. The lender sent a demand letter to recover remaining funds. They'd have to sell. Or fold. It didn't matter to me. I wasn't in it for revenge anymore. Not entirely. I was in it for something else. Closure. Not the kind wrapped in hugs and apologies, but the kind you sign for. Deliver. Walk away from. A week after the fallout, I got a call from Olivia. Not my cousin, not a friend, a potential client. Olivia owned a growing eco-construction startup. She'd followed my career quietly. She'd read the story, and she wanted me to consult. "I need someone who knows the difference between a ledger and a landmine," she said. I smiled. "That I can do." We met for coffee the following day. For the first time in years, I spoke about my work. Not my family, not damage control, not reputation defense, just strategy, growth, what I loved, what I was damn good at. When I got home that night, there was a letter in my mailbox. Handwritten. No return address, but I knew the writing. Dad. Inside was a single page. "Marissa, I thought I was protecting our legacy. I see now I was only protecting my illusion of control. You didn't destroy this family. I did. If there's a path back, any path, I hope someday you'll let me walk it. Dad." I sat with the letter in my lap for a long time. No tears. No closure speech. Just silence. The kind that comes when the noise finally stops. I didn't reply. Not then. Some doors stay closed. Some reopen on their own. But I didn't need either one. I already had what I needed. My name, my truth, my power, and a future not built on someone else's lies. They say family is forever, but sometimes what's forever isn't love. It's the damage. For years, I thought loyalty meant silence, that keeping the peace meant swallowing my hurt, cleaning up messes I didn't make, and funding a legacy I was never allowed to own. But the truth is, silence doesn't protect families. It protects abusers of trust. It enables betrayal. It rewards deception. Taking a stand against my father and brother wasn't easy. It wasn't clean. It wasn't without cost. But for the first time in my life, I chose myself. Not out of spite, not out of vengeance, but out of a deep, unshakable need to reclaim who I am. We're taught that family means sacrifice, but real family, healthy family, respects boundaries. It doesn't use your name as a bank account. It doesn't confuse love with control. So here's my message to anyone out there who's been quietly drowning in obligation. You're allowed to draw the line. You're allowed to protect your name. And you are absolutely allowed to walk away from a legacy that was built on your silence. They handed my brother the deed, but I walked away with something more powerful. My integrity, my freedom, and the truth. And that's worth more than any building ever will be. Don't forget to subscribe and like my story.